great to be with you, Bev. You know, Xi Jinping, it's important to remember, came into power at a time when the party was in crisis to some extent. Corruption was rampant. There was a lot of concern about the future of the party. And that's one of the reasons that he really prioritized anti-corruption right from the outset. You know, we forget that the dramatic party congress, when he was first selected to be kind of the apprentice, so to speak, the one who was going to be the next leader in charge, there was a lot of concern at that moment of how the future direction for the party. And I think it's important to note also that the Chinese Communist Party is keenly aware of the history of the Soviet Union, and that as the party had been in power for some time and there were problems within the system, it ultimately led to the regime's collapse. And Xi Jinping is keen not to repeat that history, and that's one of the reasons that you saw the anti-corruption campaign. That's also one of the reasons why he wants to bolster the state and the role of the state in the economy. He's always been a strong believer in the role that state-owned enterprises should play vis-a-vis the balance between private enterprises. And in fact, since Xi Jinping came into power 10 years ago, you saw the kind of slow but steady uptick in private enterprise versus state-owned enterprise kind of come to a standstill. Around 50 to 60% of the economy is now state-owned, and that has been about the same since Xi Jinping has been in power. He's championed that sector.
There have been implications, though, and right now China is facing a slowdown, very little growth compared to the extraordinary growth that it experienced over the past 2 decades. So, you know, this is hurting people.
Yes. You know, the truth is a slowdown for China was inevitable. No country, not even China, can maintain extremely high politically predetermined levels of growth in perpetuity. So a slowdown was inevitable, particularly as you become richer, it becomes harder to sustain those high levels of growth. That's why developed countries simply aren't growing at 8% a year. There's not space in the economy for that. China has also long sought to kind of rebalance and find what the leaders in Beijing describe as new or quality areas of growth. So they're no longer relying on the property sector to supercharge growth or exports to be more self-sufficient. So the slowdown was inevitable. It's been more painful in 2022, partially because of headwinds that are not unique to China, that are global. China is not the only economy experiencing a downturn at the moment, but some of them are unique to China. So, for example, the property sector challenges, but especially the way that zero COVID has wreaked havoc with the economy.
What is going to be the impact, though, of that slowdown on the global economy?
It's going to definitely drag on growth here in Asia in the coming year or two, and it's going to continue to contribute to the global slowdown. The truth is, China has been the largest and most reliable source of global growth for the past 2 decades. It's accounted for some 25% of GDP growth during those 20 years, and it's no longer that reliable source of growth. That's why you see lots of multinational corporations in particular wondering, you know, where they should be investing at the moment, because China doesn't feel like it's the safe bet that it once was. So I think the role of China's slowdown is complicating an already complicated and, you know, somewhat bleak global outlook.
Xi Jinping was determined not to jeopardise his chance at this historic 3rd term. Is there some chance, once he secures that he might relax some of these policies, in particular that COVID policy that has really impacted people?
You know, so there was a lot of speculative wishful thinking leading up to the party Congress that there would be a relaxation around zero COVID following the Congress. We've not seen any indication of that happening. There have been no kind of strong pieces of evidence to suggest that that's happening. And in fact, the language that we saw in state media leading up to the Congress and the language that Mr. Xi used during his own speech made very clear that, as he puts it, quote, the people and their lives come at the highest priority above everything else. And so, you know, he's calling it this all-out people's war against the virus. I don't think it's going to change. I do think overall there's a question whether, you know, we're in a period that feels more like ideological rule for China, and that's, I think, what has investors and kind of analysts nervous. So there is some question as to whether, once he has his 3rd term secured, will Mr. Xi recover a more pragmatic touch? That way, you know, that's yet to be seen. But at this moment, it doesn't seem that that's in the cards, because one thing that we do expect is policy continuity with his term secured.
Mattie, I really appreciate you giving your perspective at this time, this historic Congress. Good to have you on.
Always great to be with you, Bev. Thank you.